If you're a spiritual narcissist, it's actually very likely that you have no idea. One might say that there's no way narcissism and spiritual awakening could be linked. But if that's the thought process, or if you don't know what spiritual narcissism is, you're the exact person who needs to watch this video till the end. New science has put a lens on how narcissism can play a massive role in undermining true spiritual progress, and it's therefore worth understanding the problem. And in order to understand the problem, we have to do an undercover dive into the psychological makeup of what makes up a spiritual narcissist, and also look at how a study with over 3,000 participants shows a link between narcissism and spiritual awakening. So to understand what narcissism is, I now want to tell you a brief story. There once was a young hunter from central Greece. The young man named Narcissus was celebrated deeply for his beauty, and in fact was described as one of the most beautiful young men with the likes of Adonis. But this beauty came at a price. If no one could match his beauty, how could he possibly fall in love with anyone but himself? One day, Narcissus stumbled across a pool. Leaning over and gazing into it, he saw the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, and he fell in love instantly, looking at his own reflection. He gazed endlessly at the pool until he realized that his love could never be reciprocated, and in his shame and despair, he killed himself, which is where the term narcissism was born, which is defined as an exaggerated sense of self-importance, a sense of entitlement, limited or no empathy, and the exploitation of others. For a metaphor, picture the bodybuilder with no empathy who is constantly checking himself out in the mirror. So how then could narcissism be linked to spiritual awakening? Well, there's a very sneaky process that can happen. You see, when we practice spirituality, the goal is to eliminate centricity. But sometimes when we practice, we might actually cling to insights and progression along the path of insight or any sort of spiritual practice, and then use that to gratify our ego instead of perceive through it. For example, we might practice mindfulness. As a result, we gain an enhanced attentional skill set, and then we use that and we're like, wow, I'm making all this progress, I'm so good at this, and that enhances the ego. So you can see how this works in the opposite direction. So how does this happen then? Like, if the goal is ultimate freedom, what is making people do this and move in the opposite direction of awakening? Well, to understand the problem, we need to take a deeper dive into the psychological makeup of a spiritual practitioner and see how narcissism and spiritual awakening can be linked. And there's really two main portals. So number one is underconfidence. People who come to spirituality tend to have a tendency to not be that confident. Not all the time, but certainly a lot of the time, at least according to Michael Taft and Tucker Peck.
You compare meditators to controls on any psychological variable, and it turns out we were worse at baseline.
So fueled by self-improvement motives, one practices and one makes progress. And then one starts discovering the self-improvement benefits along the way. And if all goes well, the practitioner will see through their egoic tendencies, and they won't be identifying with spiritual progress. And in that way, they'll continue down toward the path of awakening. But people who tend to have lower confidence, perhaps for the first time, feel like they're really good at something. So they feel superior in this regard, and it helps for the fact that with spiritual progress, there's no real objective measures that people can use to gauge whether or not spiritual progress is being made. So it's a suitable domain for people with low self-confidence. So number two, superficial overconfidence. Now, this type of person is the person who is very goal and outcome oriented. They're very conscientious, they're very motivated, and they have incredible amount of self-confidence. Picture Narcissus looking into the water. So you can probably see how appealing spiritual practice would be to a narcissist, right? Because it involves investigation of yourself. It's all about you. Here's an outtake from an article. The extensive exploration of one's personal thoughts and feelings that spiritual training encourages may be particularly appealing to narcissists. The author writes, narcissists are actually doing spiritual training to gain what psychologists call narcissistic supply. Power, material enrichment, money, career enhancement, romantic relationships, and all that stuff. So what does science have to say about this?
Yes, science!
3 studies were conducted in a new paper titled An Exploration of Spiritual Superiority, the Paradox of Self-Enhancement, which was done to see if there was any link between narcissism and spiritual awakening, as well as a new term they dubbed spiritual superiority, where one feels superior to others who lack their attainments. The first of the 3 studies contained 533 participants undergoing spiritual training, and to gauge spiritual superiority, they were asked to answer a bunch of questions on a questionnaire as to whether or not they resonated with the person or not. For instance, one of them might have been, when I gain spiritual insights, this increases my self-worth. And surprise, surprise, they found a very strong correlation with people undergoing spiritual training to have a superiority complex. In the second study, they had 1,960 practitioners, and this one put non-spiritual practitioners up against spiritual practitioners, and the correlation between people who had done some sort of spiritual training was much higher than those who hadn't done any spiritual training, especially for the people who did energetic training, like things like Reiki. They were ranked way higher in terms of their spiritual superiority. Go figure. And in the third study, they recruited 965 participants to see if communal narcissism, which is whether people deem themselves more empathetic and nurturing than others, and spiritual superiority were linked. And in fact, there was a very strong correlation between people with this communal narcissism and spiritual superiority. So regardless of whether or not these papers are in fact accurate in their methodologies and that sort of thing for gauging spiritual superiority and narcissism, I think it's a really good reminder to do some genuine inquiry into your own practice. So ask yourself, right, am I someone who exhibits spiritual superiority? Am I narcissistic about my attainments? Why am I practicing? Why am I even practicing in the first place? Am I doing it to be liked by other people? Am I doing it to perform better so I can climb the ladder and all the way up to be the most alpha dog? To admit that there's a problem takes a huge amount of courage to do so, but it's well worthwhile and it's a step in the right direction. So let me know if this has been a problem for you. Leave a comment and if you found anything of value in this video today. And if you want to see more like this, like the video as it gets recommended to other people, and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos on awakening and mindfulness just like this one. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.